All right, good morning. This is the third and final hearing on House Bill 87. What we've done is, in the first hearing, we had Representative Ramsey go through the bill section by section for the members. We then had, during our second hearing, had organizations testify pro and con on the bill. And then, as per a previous commitment, I said that we'd have another hearing for individuals if they wanted to be heard on the bill. We've had, a fair number of people. I think the original list we've had here is about 20-something people, and that's fine. And then we've had additional people sign up. We're here until noon today. So, I mean, if the original plan had been to, give people 5 minutes each to say what they wanted to say, my sense is that if you can't say it in 5 minutes, it probably can't be said. 5 minutes is a longer period than people realize generally. At this point, if we take 5 minutes with each person, we're probably not going to get through the entire list. Just want to make sure that's clear going in. At some point, we know there is a line where the process just gives. I would also encourage folks to understand that if we can hear you, we will hear you. I'm just going to go down this list to the best of my ability. If something's been said, sometimes having things just being repetitive really isn't constructive. By the same token, if I get to somebody and even though it's already been said, you want to say it again, I'd encourage you to use your judgment on that. But I'm not going to sit here and try to tell people to not speak if they're called on. So I want to make sure that's clear. And that's whether it's pro or con. Only thing I'd ask is a couple things. Number one is if we could just go ahead and put these in the quiet or vibrate setting, we'd all appreciate it. And I think you've seen the first couple of hearings that ours is, even though it's arguably controversial subject matter, I think you've seen that our hearings here are pretty substantive. They're a deep dive. They're civil, and it really is truly a dialogue. So I'd ask anyone who's going to be here who may be interested in political theatrics or histrionics to go outside to one of the statues and hold a demonstration there, because this is not the room for that. And I'm sure that won't be the case, but I feel the need to go ahead and just say that out loud once, and now that I've said that, I'm not going to say it again. So let me go ahead and we'll just kick it off, and we'll operate under a 5-minute rule right now, and we'll just see how it goes. We're going to end around noon, as close to noon as we can, maybe a little over. We'll just see how it goes. Let me call on Ms. Jan Barton. Ms. Barton, I'm going to ask you to pick a mic. You can, any mic, and to speak into the microphone, and we welcome you. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, Mr. Ramsey. My name is Jan Barton.
Let me ask you, I'm sorry.
I'll stay right here.
You can actually bring it down if you'd like.
Okay.
There you go. Right.
My name is Jan Barton. I am an American. My husband and I live in Marietta. I love my country. As testifying in any committee is an unusual event for me, I have chosen to read from my prepared statement. Nevertheless, I mean every word. I am, by definition, a regular, everyday Georgia citizen. That puts me in the large majority of Georgians who have had far more than enough of watching the crimes of illegal immigration and illegal employment take away our jobs, our rule of law, lower our wages, alter our state, and steal our common language. I have taken the time out of my day to come to the Capitol for each of the joint immigration hearings and all the hearings here on HB 87. I am here as a citizen voter to urge you to please pass HB 87 out of this committee, to pass it out of the Georgia legislature, and do all due diligence to be sure that it is enforced as all of our laws must be. I am here to express my personal thanks to Representative Ramsey for his courage and hard work in crafting this important bill, and to thank Senator Chip Rogers for beginning the process in 2006. Please let me add my voice to the majority of Georgians who cannot be here today. We will no longer remain silent while our jobs are being filled by illegal aliens who got away from brave Border Patrol agents. We clearly see that we have a budget crisis, and will not stand by while our state government allows services and benefits to go to people who have no right to be here because of orders from the business community. The most important section of Representative Ramsey's bill is the E-Verify requirement to obtain or renew a business license. I urge you to stand up to the Chamber of Commerce, the Farm Bureau, and the other powerful and wealthy groups who are anti-enforcement. I have watched them sit here and insist that our immigration laws do not apply to them. This is an un-American concept. Because of the slanted reporting of many in our media, Georgians are only recently learning about the fact that the agriculture industry can get all the legal workers it needs with the use of the H-2A visa. But we are learning. The lobbyists that oppose enforcement and E-Verify who spoke to you here earlier this week are not fooling most of us, and I hope they're not fooling you. They are asking you and the rest of the legislature to continue to grant a state amnesty to illegal aliens and their illegal employers. I came today with great respect for the elected officials and the office you hold to ask you all to serve Georgia and protect and defend our Constitution. Change will come to Georgia legislature if anti-enforcement special interest groups win out over the people and laws of Georgia. I read that approximately 1,000 businesses enroll in E-Verify every week voluntarily, and that more than 16,000 employers are already using E-Verify in Georgia in an effort to do the right thing. I heard Mr. King earlier this week ask you to decide if Georgia will be pro-enforcement and pro-American or be seen as anti-enforcement. I agree with Mr. King. You must make a decision. Governor Perdue repeatedly promised to support this sort of legislation during his campaign and to support and promote the required use of the no-cost E-Verify program. This is not Atlanta versus South Carolina or Democrat versus Republican. This is about right versus wrong and protecting our children's future and the American and legal immigrant workers here in Georgia. If you listen to the rich lobbyists, what do I say to my grandchildren when they ask me why we did not stop illegal immigration? I am grateful for my time today and once again thank Matt Ramsey. I urge all of you to join him, Governor Deal, and the majority of law-abiding Georgians in demonstrating your sense of duty and opposition to illegal immigration here in our beloved state. If not enforcement now, when? We already have proven that amnesty only creates more illegal immigration. Thank you very much for your time and your hard work.
Ms. Barton, thank you so much for coming down here
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
and being heard.
Thank you, committee.
Call on Ms. Stephanie Ralston.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Excuse me.
My name was first on the list right before.
Thank you so much, but we're actually operating on several lists right now, and the fact that someone's name may be in a particular position on the list is not relevant. Thank you. Ms. Stephanie Ralston.
Thank you very much. I'm not the public speaker, so I'll just read what I wrote.
You know, most of us aren't either, so please don't, contrary to what we actually believe, so please don't be nervous. Just take your time, and most of us don't bite, but I won't let anybody bite, so don't worry.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Stephanie Ralston. I'm educated, experienced, but have been looking for work for 3 years. My 15-year-old and I currently would live with my mom. I do not take any public monies, nor do I want to. I'd happily take any low-skilled job to be a good role model for my son. He has asked me about the American dream before and wants to work but cannot find a job. I worry about him, his friends, and other kids in his generation that cannot find work. I have great respect for legal immigrants, particularly my friends that have spent many years to come here by the rules and spent thousands of dollars to become citizens. It broke my heart when one friend told me he regrets that decision. To me, allowing illegal aliens in Georgia while 450,000 plus Georgians sit on unemployment is like giving a bank robber a Congressional Medal of Honor for their efforts. I implore you to get HB 87 into the House and passed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ralston. Mr. Joe Newton, catsofgeorgia.com.
I'll
Yeah, I got that before. But thanks for reiterating that.
I left at 4 o'clock this morning to get here. This is the third time.
Sir, if I need any more, I'll let you know. Thank you. Unless you'd like to come up here and share it.
I'd like to come up here and speak.
Well, thanks.
My kids,
The more, I tell you what, you're doing exactly what I asked you not to do earlier. Okay? Thanks. Let me call on Mr. Ev Howe of Atlanta Building Leadership. Oh, I'm sorry. There's Mr. Newton. Mr. Newton, come on in.
Sorry for the delay, Mr. Chairman.
It's all right, Mr. Newton. We're operating under a 5-minute rule, so
Yes, sir.
thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you very much. Let me catch my breath.
That's all right. We're fine. We're fine.
My name is Joe Newton. I live in Gwinnett County. I have a BS in Business and Economics, a law degree, and a master's in litigation. I worked for a Supreme Court Justice, retired Justice George C. Smith, for 12 years, and I've worked in and around the General Assembly for the last 6 years. I've also been working for the last several years to estimate the cost of illegal immigration in Gwinnett County, and recently reviewed the testimony of Sheriff Butch Conway before the Joint Committee on Illegal Immigration. Sheriff Conway testified that there's 40,000 bookings in his jail per year, and of that number, 14 to 15,000 were foreign-born folks, and 60% were illegal, undocumented immigrants. The Gwinnett County School Planning Department estimates that their population probably mirrors the jail population, and they also give the breakdown of their population, school population, as 25.2 Hispanic Latino, 28.7% Black, 10.3% Asian, 31.6% white, and 4.2% other mixed race students. If you compute the sheriff's figures, it comes out to between 21 and 22% of the jail population are illegal immigrants. If you take that conversion, or that percentage rate, and apply it to the $1.76 billion Gwinnett school budget, and divide out the official school population, you come out with $10,955.53 per student. Times 21% comes up to a grand total of $396.2 million a year is the cost of illegal immigration. That is a minimum cost, because that does not cover the full percentage of Hispanics, 25.2%, nor the 10.3% Asian, or the 4.2% other mixed race, and allows nothing for black or white citizens that may be illegals, even though that should be a very small minority. Now, the point is, it's taken me 3 years to come up with these figures, and this does not provide any approximation for government-sponsored medical facilities, or the courts, or the police, and the district attorney's office. Sheriff Conway admits that the figure for his jail population is somewhere around 9.4 million, but I submit to you that that's just a drop in a bucket when it comes to the entire cost of law enforcement. What I am arguing for in this paper, and I've passed it around twice to the committee members, is that you put something in the statute, Representative Ramsey, sir, that would require, upon school registration, that the school officials ask about the citizenship, whether they're a citizen, whether you're on a green card, or whatever their status is, and their country of origin. Have the parents sign this under pain of perjury, do this in a non-threatening manner, and do the same thing at government-sponsored medical facilities. then and only then will we be able to come up with an accurate count of the cost of illegal immigration. Until that time, it is mere speculation. The school system has admitted that there is no state or federal regulation or rule prohibiting them from asking this information, nor is there any rule, regulation, or statute requiring them to obtain this information, and therefore they don't do it because they're not required to. I am simply asking that you help provide this information, and let's get to the bottom of what this costs. And thank you very much. And
Thank you, Mr.
I hope
Newton.
you'll consider that as an amendment, please.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much, all of you.
Just for members, given the fact that we're operating under a 5-minute rule, we're probably, in order to get as many people heard as we humanly can, we're probably not going to be able to take questions, but that doesn't preclude any questions afterwards, certainly.
I was just curious what his organization.
Oh, it was called catsofgeorgia.com.
Which is what?
I don't know.
Animal protection?
I don't think so. Mr. Howe.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Ev Howe, retired, 21-year Cold War and Vietnam veteran pilot,
Thank you for your service.
flying Lockheed Smyrna airplanes, C-130s, 141s, and C-5s.
Thank you very much for your service.
I also worked in Smyrna helping to create the Lockheed F-22 stealth fighter, the premier fighter in the world.
Can I buy your lunch? Please?
But being retired, I currently work at our church with the poor. I'm serving the poor, St. Vincent de Paul Society, and I run an English as a second language course. I'm a perfect fit with Atlanta's Building Leadership for Empowerment. Able, working issues that the grassroots citizens care about and worry about. With HB 87, I hate to say this, I feel like I've been sent back in time to the years of the 50s and 60s. This bill makes me actually kind of ill. We've heard church leader testimony. Now let's evaluate this bill by page in a God we trust kind of way. Does it show love of God and love of neighbor? Page 1, already, take out the illegal alien. It's hateful, and it's not used in the federal documents for the I-9. It's unauthorized alien. So take it out, change it to unauthorized alien if you're going to be consistent with federal law. Page 2, spending Georgia money enforcing federal law is a waste of our money here in Georgia. It does not indicate love for our citizens. Lines 29 through 31. Page 3, encourages vigilantes like we used to have in the 50s and 60s to sue our own government. Our own taxpayers will pay for these costs. I don't want to do that. Delete lines 60 through 65. Page 4. I've been doing this for a while. I'm really interested in the work you do, but this is just the old Senate Bill 20. It was passed 2 years ago, which already has state agencies enforcing this law. We don't need vigilante justice. Page 5. It's not love, it's prohibitively costly. Lines 144 through 7. It encourages frivolous lawsuits. Page 6 through 7. This is taking words out of a larger context. I've got here Federal Code against interstate trafficking, which is a page before the page, this part here, that has all of the in-state arrests. It's not love, and it's incredibly taxing, and it's anti-Christian. We have local law enforcement arrest or intimidate those of us who love our neighbors and give them a ride to church and hospitals, and maybe assist them like many church charities do, like I do. And what about MARTA and taxi drivers? Are you going to arrest them too? Lock us all up for a month? Fine us $1,000? And take away my 1998 Saturn car with 177,000 miles? I don't think the police will particularly want my car, especially with a no racial profiling sticker and a no SB 1070 on the bumper. Page 8. This was deleted from the Arizona law, so why waste our monies for another lawsuit? In addition, it's hateful and may result in arresting Canadians and others on international driver's licenses. for not having a Georgia license. Page 9. All right. This is great. And thank you, Representative Ramsey. We need HB 87 to be our first Georgia no racial profiling law. It's I've heard of in some counties where they've arrested people for reporting that their car was stolen because they were not an authorized immigrant. But you can cut the rest of the page, lines 267 through 73. Our jails are already too full. The federal government dictates who goes already into full Georgia detention centers. And by the way, we have the highest capacity detention center in the country. This is all costly, not love. And this part was also cut out of the Arizona law. Why are we doing this? Page 10 advocates random interrogations. It's costly. Secure community fingerprinting database makes detection of unauthorized aliens almost instantaneous and almost free. There is no need to keep wasting our money for extra sheriffs and paying for 287G training. We need to stop 287G. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of our money. It's a waste of our manpower. The immunity section for police section will promote racial profiling. Delete. Page 11 through 13. That's last year's bounty bill that never made it because HB 1164 was too expensive, and it still is. Keeping misdemeanor crimes in jail longer is not love. We need to cut it, and I don't think it's legal. You have a 48-hour rule once someone can postpone. Page 14, E-Verify. Well, we've heard the testimony. It's bad for business, but I'll let them carry that cross. It certainly is not love of business in Georgia. Page 15 through 16. It's rather confusing, and if it's what I read it to be, it's not love. It implies that you're going to go after food stamps for U.S. citizen children of unauthorized immigrant parents. Will this prevent a U.S. fetus from getting WIC without a citizenship card? There's another thing you need to consider. 83%, all the children of unauthorized alien parents in Georgia are U.S. citizens.
Mr. Howe, you've reached 5 minutes. Let me ask you to wind up if you could.
Actually, I was on the last phrase.
Great.
I would urge you all to vote no. Vote like you think Jesus would do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Howe, and thank you again for your service to our country.
And I have the references if you need.
Thank you. And let me also say, if anybody has any written materials that they want to submit to the committee, we will see to it that members get individual copies handed out after the hearing is, or distributed after the hearing is over. Let me call Mr. Robert Ross. Let me also say to members, I understand it's Friday, and especially to those members on the committee who have very distant drives ahead of them. Real life does get in the way, so if you need to exit, please don't be hesitant. We understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
members
sir.
of the committee. Appreciate the work that you put into this, and Representative Ramsey for your sponsorship. I'm also a regular Georgia citizen who came here at my own expense. I spent 28 years in service to the country as an Army officer, not at 30,000 feet, but down on the ground in the 2nd Infantry Division in Korea with a command of 2,300 people. Throughout that 2 years, I never had a complaint against me of an equal opportunity nature, nor in other commands that I held. I did have a lot of different ethnic backgrounds under the command, but I think they all recognize the fact that we need to adhere to standards, and standards that are evenly enforced and understood are beneficial to the organization. My family and I have also lived as aliens and minorities in the Republic of Panama and the Republic of Korea. We've also been legal aliens in China, Thailand, Japan, and Kuwait. I understand the Department of Homeland Security's definitions and the difference between an alien, an illegal alien, and an immigrant, and know that only those aliens who follow the rule of law are entitled to be known as immigrants. I oppose illegal aliens in Georgia because it's unlawful conduct. It erodes our society by flaunting the law. It is unjust, if we see justice as the equal application of the law. It's expensive, and certainly it's patently unfair to past, present, and future aliens who obey the law. Like a majority of Georgia citizens, I oppose the state amnesty for illegal aliens supported by the Farm Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce. And I look to my elected officials to use every legal means available to protect me and other Georgia citizens from the impacts. I and many other Georgians are fully aware of the H-2A visa available to agricultural employers, and that employers who ignore it and pay lower black market versus prevailing wages pass on that difference to taxpayers to the tune of over $2 billion a year. I also found the Seattle Times, which is a Pulitzer Prize-winning newspaper, last year investigative report, which I've provided to the panel co-chairs, that showed that the labor component of $1 worth of their very labor-intensive crop, apples, would rise by only 1 to 3 cents per dollar if we use legal instead of illegal labor in the agricultural industry of Washington State. We're watching to see which legislators support the rule of law and which ones owe allegiance to the Farm Bureau and the Chamber of Commerce. I've read the Senate and House bills and clearly understand that neither allows profiling or does it address immigration. They do, however, clearly respond to illegal aliens in the state. I see some people pointing out the fact that Georgia is not Arizona. I'd have to agree with them. We have more illegal aliens than Arizona. We do not have border patrol protection like Arizona, and we are a year behind that state enacting legislation that would protect our citizens. Some here are expressing the sentiment that they welcome illegal aliens. Perhaps they'd like to give me their home address so I can route people to reside in their homes without regard to their rights and the rule of law. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. We appreciate your service. My father was in Korea as well, although he was really safe on a destroyer off the coast. So I think if he were here, he'd say thank you. Sir, you mentioned before that you got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Is that a correct statement? All right. Well, then why don't I ask you to come up? Why don't I ask you to come up and give us your thoughts? Can I get your name?
Sean McKenzie.
Sean McKenzie. And Mr. McKenzie, just want to remind you we're under the 5-minute rule as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize if I seemed overly combative. I had come to a previous
It's all right.
committee meeting and waited a long time, didn't get to testify.
It's not a problem. We appreciate your taking the time to be here this morning.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm a public school teacher. I'm desperately concerned that this bill is going to hurt my kids. I've taught before a young lady who was a valedictorian of her class. She would come on the intercom every morning and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. She would say, "Liberty and justice for all." We would all say that with her. That we had gone through several kids who didn't say the Pledge of Allegiance very well, and that was the young lady we arrived at. Her dad's been picked up recently. Her family's going to be torn apart by our concern for this immigration issue. I've got another young lady that I've taught who is an AP student who obeys every rule, has no intention of flouting authority in any way, is the most polite young lady you'd ever meet. I nominated 8 students from a honors class of mine to participate in Girls Nation one summer. She was the only one who wanted to do that and participated in that, and her father has also been picked up recently. Another student of mine is currently in college. He came on his own when he was 14 years old. He did come illegally. He was concerned that because he had 3 brothers, his father couldn't afford to feed him, and because he felt guilty, he wanted to be able to provide for himself and help his own family. That's the reason he came. He's currently studying to be a nurse. All he wants to do is help people. I agree with the testimony that we heard just a moment ago that this legislation is not Christian. I don't accuse anyone who disagrees with me on this of not being a Christian. I've had very civil conversations with 2 of the people who disagree with me on this issue before the hearings began. However, Scripture tells us that we're to love the alien, we're to be merciful, we're to forgive trespasses, we're to welcome the stranger, were to treat others as we would like to be treated. Every major denomination, leaders of every major denomination have spoken out against enforcement-only immigration bills. It was the Pharisees, not the early Christians, who were legalistic. The rule of law gets brought up a lot. The Tea Party folks are here. I've had some nice conversations with Tea Party folks. I would remind everybody that the original participants in the Boston Tea Party were lawbreakers, as was Thomas Jefferson and John Hancock and Harriet Tubman and Susan B. Anthony and Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King and the Apostle Paul, all the Christian martyrs, and Christ himself, who was executed as a criminal. One person told me that there's a process. There's a process by which people could come over here legally, and if they just go through the right process, everything will be okay. But a recent John Stossel article points out that a Mexican father with a high school diploma, if they apply to come here legally, it would take 100 years to get here. All of my students who are not here legally would come here legally if it was possible. So I would like to ask everyone here, everyone, committee members, Tea Party members, opponents of illegal immigration, if it was you and it was your children and you were born on the wrong side of the border and you had the dilemma, what am I going to do? Am I going to obey the government or am I going to provide for my children? What would you do? I believe that this legislation is not American because my kids believe in the American dream. They will work as hard as it takes. All they want is a chance. But the current immigration laws give them no chance to come here legally. And finally, I would like to say that, yes, I agree. Georgia's not Arizona because we're the South. And here in the South, we believe in hospitality. There's a song called Southern Voice by Tim McGraw. And in that song, he says the essence of the Southern Voice is, "Hi, y'all. Did you eat? Well, come on in. I'm sure glad to know you." That's who we are. In Calhoun, Georgia, Calhoun is named for the vice president who wanted to nullify unjust laws. We obey the law most of the time, but people speed. People look at the law as a guide, but in extreme situations, we've got to make the choice of whether or not we're going to obey the law. We in the South celebrate moonshine when we watch NASCAR and when we watch Dukes of Hazzard, and in Gatlinburg, which also has an enforcement-only bill pending, they're setting up a moonshine museum where we go to celebrate the lawbreakers who were good at moonshine. So in summation, I would like to say that I love everyone here. I'm not here to condemn anybody, including the sponsor of this bill. But this bill is unchristian, unkind, it's legalistic, it's un-American, it's un-Southern, and we, the people of Georgia and the United States of America, are better than this, so let's not do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McKenzie, for coming down this morning. Let me call on Mr. John Spear of the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Department. Yep.
As people are speaking, I can hear comments from people observing. If you would just remind folks to keep comments inside their heads and not coming out of their mouths, so we can appreciate what people have to say.
Thank you for the comment. Now that I'm in the prime of my middle age, I'm sometimes not hearing things that I heard 10 years ago. So if we could keep the buzz level down, that really would be a great courtesy to your neighbor and to the members as well. Mr. Spear, thank you so much for coming down this morning, and I'll just remind you that we're under the 5-minute rule as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and Mr. Ramsey, thank you for this bill. I would like to speak of my experience with law enforcement. I'm involved in law enforcement for 25 years in the Atlanta area.
Let me ask you to move a little closer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Formerly, my people will tell me I will talk way too much.
We get that a lot, too.
Yes. My experience, like I said, is with the criminal aspect of the illegal immigration problem, or whatever name you want to call it. With the Gwinnett County Sheriff's Department, we do have a 287G program, and we are members of secure communities. They are both tools, and they both work hand in hand. They're different in the way they actually work, and we don't have enough time to go into that. But as a 287G program, one of the things that we noticed in the Gwinnett County area was a problem with individuals that were coming into the jail that were arrested for criminal offenses against citizens in Gwinnett County and Georgia at large. these people do cause tax dollars to be used to house, prosecute, and to maintain them within the jails. It costs approximately $45 per day to house one inmate in the Gwinnett County Jail per day. One of the things the sheriff noticed when back in 2009 we had a steady increase of individuals coming into the detention center to the point where we were housing, as was mentioned earlier, about 14,000 a year were coming in. We started the program and we immediately saw an increase, and the year prior, which would be 2008 to 2009, we had over 14,000 people that came in that were identified as foreign-born nationals. In 2009 to 2010, the same an additional year, it dropped to just over 10,000. That relates to a decrease in crimes that were committed in Gwinnett County, and also a decrease in the taxpayers or the money the taxpayers needed to come forward to house and prosecute these individuals. We can go back and forth, and I can agree with the fact that we're going to have to agree to disagree on some aspects of this law. As a citizen of Gwinnett County in Georgia, I fully support this bill, and I hope that you will pass it. Thank you very much.
We do have a couple minutes, and I wanted to just ask you, just given your professional experience, obviously in the Sheriff's Department, when you see people in the process that you go through with 287G, where does that start? Does it start generally with the traffic stop? Is that the vast majority of the cases, or no?
The process within the 287G program, there are also two different types of programs. There's jail models and task force models. The jail model is what the detention center has, which means that anybody that's encountered is arrested for a criminal offense. It may be a traffic offense, and it may be murder.
But as a practical matter, does it start with traffic?
As a practical matter, it's going to start with a criminal violation, a stop of some type. It could be a traffic, but it could be many other things also. Okay. And we see the entire gamut.
You got time for a question, Mr. Ramsey?
I just want to, say thank you for being here, but just to clarify the point that you were making. You're suggesting that the taxpayer savings and the reduction in crime are directly attributed to a greater enforcement of the rule of law through the 287G program.
I truly believe it has been. I mean, I noticed this in our area. I have spoken with our agencies that work with the Sheriff's Department, and they have noticed a decrease in their call volumes, the types of individuals they're encountering, and a general difference in the safety that's out there on the road.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time this morning. Let me call Mr. Zeb Blanchard, if he's here. Yeah.
Everybody has a lot to offer. I guess I don't have much of anything to offer other than I'm Zeb Blanchard from Ivy Log, a citizen. I support this bill, encourage you to pass it. My family's been damaged profoundly by illegal immigrants, therefore I don't care to speak to the bill because I'm prejudiced. However, I do have comments relative to the bill. In response to, in addition to follow-on to Gwinnett Sheriff's Department, I take exception to the insinuations that seem to be floating around against law enforcement officers' demeanor. I'm a police academy graduate. I was a deputy sheriff some years ago, actually decades ago. The course at that time was 300 hours and included extensive training in ascertaining probable cause and reasonable suspicion. Amendment 4 speaks to unreasonable searches. That's why law enforcement officers are taught the intricacies of determining probable cause and reasonable suspicion. The responsibility of law enforcement is to protect the citizens' constitutional rights, and law enforcement officers swear an oath to defend the Constitution, which includes the people's inalienable rights. I had the folks back there read my spiel to validate my comments, and they verified that nothing's changed, except the officers now get more training. The other concern I have is related to what I see as a good possibility of Arizona losing states' rights and sovereignty out of their challenge to the immigration issue. Our Constitution established the governance of the United States as a constitutional republic with a system of dual sovereignty whereby a small central government would coordinate the well-being of various states under the constraints of a few enumerated powers. The states were left with the responsibility of administering to the people. Clause 4 of the enumerated powers section of the Constitution empowers Congress to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and then goes silent on any further empowerment dealing with immigrants, illegals, or aliens. There is no constitutional mandate that the federal government can use to spin supremacy on this issue. I'll speak to supremacy in a minute. However, the 10th Amendment says the power is not delegated to the states, reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. Georgia is challenging the federal government based on Georgia's status as a sovereign state with 10th Amendment rights. The federal government will challenge Georgia on this bill. Article 3, Section 2, Paragraph 2 of the Constitution specifies that in all cases in which a state shall be party, the Supreme Court shall have original jurisdiction. Be prepared to challenge federal standing if they attempt to bring suit in any court short of the Supreme Court. Furthermore, Article 6, Paragraph 2 states in part that this Constitution and the laws of the United States shall be made in pursuance thereof shall be the supreme law of the land. This is a supremacy clause in the Constitution. It pertains to the Constitution, not the federal government. The federal government shares sovereignty with the states, giving the right, according to the law of the Constitution, to enforce the rules of naturalization created by Congress, should this legislative body decide to do so. I'm asking, please stand up for Georgia state's rights in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blanchard, for coming down this morning. Let me call on, I just had it and lost it. I'm sorry, Ms. Susan Pavlin with Refugee Family Services.
Sir, she's not here this morning. She's submitted.
Thank you very much for letting me know that. Call on Chris Starr, Church of Atonement. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
And now I'll just tell you that we're operating under the 5-minute rule.
I'm not sure I can do that. Thank you very much.
We suffer the same malady, but do your
That's
best.
all right.
Thank you.
I will be brief.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, for the opportunity to present my thoughts. I stand before you today on the shoulders of my own immigrant forebears who arrived in this country, greeted by signs all over New York, no Irish need apply. And after their migration to Augusta, Georgia, with crosses burning on the lawns of their churches. It was during this same period in our country's great history that a presidential candidate, Stephen Douglas, in a bid for political support, argued against granting blacks, even freed blacks, passports. The laborers that had helped create our agricultural economy were to be denied full citizenship. And I think such is our situation today, as mostly Spanish-speaking immigrants fill the growing demand for laborers to fuel our country's economic growth. Their presence among us is fortuitous as it supplies a demand, as with my own Irish forebears, for the growing needs of our economy. They also, more importantly, bear witness to the endurance of the American dream. The idea of denying an immigrant group support and hospitality as they assist us to meet such important economic ends is as foolish today as it was 150 years ago. Lincoln, most recently a member of the Illinois legislature, struggled to form Illinois' Republican Party in the 1850s, and he allied it with the American people's growing anti-slavery and anti-nativist sentiments. On August 24, 1855, Lincoln wrote to his friend Joshua Speed, "Our progress in degeneracy appears to me to be pretty rapid. As a nation, we began by declaring that all men are created equal. We now practically read it, all men are created equal except Negroes. When the know-nothings get control, it will read, all men are created equal except Negroes, foreigners, and Catholics. When it comes to this, I should prefer, Lincoln continued, immigrating to some country where they make no pretense of loving liberty, to Russia, for instance, where despotism can be taken pure and without the base alloy of hypocrisy. Lincoln's success over the next 10 years as President and Commander-in-Chief opened the doors not only to freed slaves, but for the presidency of John Kennedy, a son of Ireland, the popular vote victory of Joe Lieberman, a Jew, and our current President Barack Obama, an African American. That these victories of our Constitution and the American dream will soon be followed by an American president of Hispanic descent is inevitable. Inevitable for those of us who believe in our Constitution and the laws that give it skin and bone. Inevitable for those of us who view HB 87 as yet another version of No Irish Need Apply, or even worse, the Dred Scott decision, or 100 years of Jim Crow. I'll stop. But
thank you for coming down this morning.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Denise Ognio, if I'm saying that incorrectly, please correct me.
Ogino is an Italian name, and my husband's descendants came over here illegally. They were immigrants, but they were legal. I thank you guys for allowing us all to speak this morning. Thank you, Chairman and Committee Chair. I love my country, and I'm taking time off work today to come and ask you, as you're looking at this bill, I've read it several times now. There are some things that I see that need tweaking, but overall I do agree with the bill and that it should be passed. As I said, I'm taking time off work today, and I have to work because I pay my taxes. And in that, if I don't pay my taxes, I go to jail. And I would ask that there are penalties for those people who do not follow the law, that they do follow the law. It is hard enough for me to support my family. My husband and I both work. We have 3 kids. I do not wish to support others. While immigrants are very welcome in this country, and my husband's family is immigrant, illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, unauthorized aliens are not welcome. I'm very disappointed that Governor Deal has not strongly stated his support for this bill, for the E-Verify, and I hope he honors his campaign promises to do so. I work for a company that has used E-Verify for several years now. I work for a company that uses E-Verify, started using E-Verify. We had a lady who was 87 years old who called us one day after we sent out our W-2s to let me know that she had not worked in many years, but someone had stolen her identity. We started using E-Verify. It is working for us. It is worth the effort for our company to use it to put people to work, and we don't mind putting immigrants to work. We do mind putting illegal immigrants to work. I had the opportunity several years ago to help teach English to an immigrant as he learned the English language. He studied, he became a citizen of the United States. We cried together as he obtained his citizenship. It meant something. I welcome this type of immigrant. I would urge people in this room to try this route. It's very rewarding. And as a Christian myself, I believe this is the way that I can love my neighbors, to help teach them English and to help them get their citizenship. I have no problem with immigrants. I'm hearing America should be the land of opportunity. America is the land of opportunity, and I'm proud to say, I like being proud to say, that we should be fair and just. We don't break the rules and laws, and we welcome immigrants who are willing to follow the same laws we do. Please pass this bill, HB 87. Protect U.S. citizens and those who abide by the laws. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time in the day from work to share your thoughts with us this morning. Call Tricia Sung, please. Well, if she comes, she can be in the on-deck position then. Let's call Ms. Charmaine Davis. Ms. Charmaine Davis. No? Okay. Ms. June McDowell? Ms. June McDowell? No? Okay, great. And who was, do you know who that was? She's just coming down the hall. Oh, yeah, I mean, we're under 5 minutes, so effectively, you know. Welcome.
Hi, welcome.
Let us know who you are.
Thank you for welcoming me.
Sure.
Yes, my name is Tricia Sung, and I am president of OCA Georgia, which is a civil rights organization that serves the social, political, and economic well-being of Asian Pacific Americans here in Georgia.
Ms. Sung, I'm sorry to interrupt. Let me just remind you we're under a 5-minute rule.
Sure.
Thank you.
But the home of civil rights. And so I'm here also as a parent, Christian, concerned citizen, commissioner of the Gwinnett County Human Relations Commission, and resident of Gwinnett County, which was recently designated as a majority minority county, with one of the largest Asian Pacific American communities, and also innumerable small APA businesses and a wealth of foreign business investments throughout the county and actually throughout the state. That I really want to ask the legislators to be judicious about moving forward with HB 87. It is something that will unfortunately bring irreparable damage to our state. We are not we are not Arizona. We are a civil rights Georgia. Asian Pacific Americans do not want the state to go back to Jim Crow segregated Georgia. We remember quite clearly the legacy of race-based exclusionary policies against Asian Americans. From history, we know that the first race-based exclusion act was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Now, the Chinese immigrants, they came and helped to build the infrastructure here in the United States by building the Transcontinental Railroad in the mid-19th century. By doing so, at the completion of the railroad in 1869, they were prohibited from being in the final picture that commemorated the joining of the West and the East railroads. And since then, we have seen that with the Exclusion Act of 1882, which was renewed and then ultimately repealed in 1943, when we had better diplomatic relations with our partners in China, we saw that it left a lasting legacy on the American imagination of who Asian Pacific Americans are. Unfortunately, it has led to the perpetuation of Asian Americans as perpetual foreigners here in the United States. We have also observed that other race-based policies like the Japanese American internment in World War II, which later U.S. presidents did apologize for, restrictions in administering veteran benefits to APA veterans, as in the case of the Filipino veterans, which the U.S. government recently apologized for, and also the subsequent racial profiling in post 9/11 against our South Asian immigrants. That we do not want to see more Jim Crow era segregation tactics here in Georgia. As a parent, I am here to ask all of you to do the work that we elected you to do, which is to focus on our economy, get Georgians back to work, and quite frankly, to focus on the education of our future generations. We want an open, civil, and diverse and inclusive Georgia. Thank you so much.
Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Mr. Michael Opitz. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Michael Opitz. I'm a resident of Cobb County, and I'm here representing myself this morning. Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. And I want to thank Representative Ramsey for drafting this much-needed legislation. I support this legislation, and it's common sense legislation for any country or state wishing to maintain common order for its boundaries and its citizens. Without this kind of common sense legislation, and it is long, long overdue, no country and no entity can survive. No country, no entity through history has ever been able to survive with unchecked illegal immigration in whatever form that it needs to be named. This legislation is indeed common sense, and it will go a long way in solving a lot of Georgia's problems with illegal immigration. It's not perfect legislation, but it's a wonderful, wonderful start. My grandparents came to this country, my grandmother from Poland and my grandfather from Austria in the early 1900s. They came through Ellis Island. They came here legally with millions of other immigrants coming through Ellis Island. Our country has always accepted immigrants, and everybody in this room, heritage came from someplace else. So I don't know anyone who is against immigration, since we are all as a result of those immigrants. It's important that we have common sense legislation and protection, not only for our society, but also for our jobs as we undergo difficult economic times. And E-Verify is another common sense solution to a problem that certainly must be addressed. And it's sad that there are so many people who view it with their own parochial limitations in understanding that in order to grow both companies as well as individuals, that we must have job protection. This country is perhaps the most successful country in the entire world, in the history of the world. And for those people who have testified this morning and have concerns about bias, who have concerns about prejudice, they came here seeking a better way of life. And they knew the history of this country before they came here. So I am certainly not opposed to anyone seeking a better way of life, which is what we're doing today in protecting our society. And again, I thank you for the consideration of this legislation, and I do urge its passage. However, nothing is ever perfect, and I'd like to call your attention to page 3, lines 69 through 74. And this deals with Superior Court judges finding anyone in violation or any government agency in violation, that their fines be allocated to police training. Well, I think individuals should be responsible, not the government agencies, because if a superior court then allocates the fine to a municipal agency, then that municipal agency can certainly shuffle its funds around to another area, and no one gets punished for violating the law. And there has to be individual accountability, not just organizational accountability that in effect doesn't have any financial repercussions. So with that, I thank you again very much for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Opitz. Let me call on Ms. Charmaine Davis. I think I called that name before. No? Okay. Give it a second in case she's coming down from the other room. Members, as you can tell, I'm making a very good faith, I hope, attempt to go back and forth between pro and con. Sometimes it's not readily discernible on the sign-up, so we're going to do our best between pro and con to make it as balanced as we can. Okay. Ms. June McDowell. Ms. June McDowell. And if somebody comes in after someone else has started, they can be on deck. Ms. Andrea Lyle. Ms. Andrea Lyle. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
Okay, I'm going to be quick. My name is Andrea Lyle. I live in Fayetteville, Georgia, and it's the main thing I wanted to read to you is an ad in the Fayette County classified ads for jobs. I've been looking for a job now for 4 years. My husband was laid off 2 years ago. The ad reads, appointment scheduler, busy OBGYN practice has opening for a full-time experienced appointment scheduler. Must be bilingual. No other applicants will be considered. This is very common in the papers in Henry, Clayton, Spalding, Fayette, and Coweta County, and it's becoming more and more common. I have been a secretary, I have worked medical, I have worked private industry for 30 years, and I cannot get a job. I feel inferior and I feel intimidated. I do feel for those who seek a better life, but I do not believe that HB 87 is unchristian-like, because there are laws that as a Christian I don't agree with, but I have to obey them. And I believe that everyone should have to obey the laws. And I know it must be tough, because it's tough for me, because I'm about to lose my home. It's on the market now. Paying property taxes without a job for 4 years is pretty hard. So, you know, there are two sides, I understand, but the rule of law has to be obeyed by Christians. And these type of ads are only hurting citizens who have contributed for, you know, years and years and years, working here in the state of Georgia. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come down here this morning. Let me call Vicki DeMartinez. Vicki DeMartinez. I guess nobody came from the other names I said before. They weren't. Okay. Give it just a couple more seconds in case somebody's coming down the hall. Vicki DeMartinez. Okay. Ms. Dorothy Foster. Ms. Dorothy Foster. Are you also Mrs. Stan Foster?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Thank you. We've just economized the list. Thank you.
Religious leaders of every denomination and creed have spoken out against enforcement-only immigration policy. As an educator for 30 years in Georgia, I've taught over 1,000 immigrants how to speak English and civics. I'm also a member and a past president of Georgia TESOL, the Teachers of English to Speakers of Other Languages, and a church volunteer. I implore you to stop this unjust and unwise legislation. If HB 87 passes, people like myself will be arrested for taking our church members to immigration appointments. In my experience, it's immoral and inaccurate to classify people as legal or illegal. Many are in various stages in their laborious and expensive process of getting their documents in order. You can read from some of these stories in the December issue of Georgia Trend magazine. Others have come escaping violence and poverty. I grew up in Guatemala as a missionary child, and I saw the misery of the people there as I grew up. There's no legal way presently for people like that to get papers in this country. With very few exceptions, only rich, landed, highly educated people are admitted to this country. Searching for better ways to address problems of immigration, my church, which is Nakuchi Presbyterian Church in Sati, sends people to Latin America to help with development projects, because that's where the problem is, and that's where it needs to be addressed. We need to help them so they don't need to come to another country. On January 30th, 80 people at my church discussed the consequences of HB 87. Economic decline, high foreclosure rates, a destroyed reputation as a welcoming state. People in 10 different counties, 12 different counties have embraced a Georgia Compact that we put together. That's a declaration of 5 principles that I think we should consider when we're doing legislation. First of all is that the immigration situation is a federal policy issue. We urge Georgia's congressional delegation to lead efforts to strengthen federal laws and provide humane, comprehensive immigration reform. We also respect the rule of law that is focused on real criminal activities, not civil violations of federal code. We believe in strong families are the foundation of successful communities. We oppose policies that unnecessarily separate families. We champion policies that support families and improve the health, education, and well-being of all of Georgia's children. Georgia is best served by a free market philosophy that maximizes individual freedom and opportunity. We acknowledge the economic role immigrants play as workers and taxpayers. Georgia's immigration policies must reaffirm our global reputation as a welcoming and business-friendly state. Finally, this is a free society. Immigrants are integrated into our communities across Georgia. They are my friends and my neighbors, and some of them are even considered part of my family. We must adopt a humane approach to this reality, reflecting our unique culture, history, and the spirit of inclusion. Georgia will always be a place that welcomes people of goodwill. In Leviticus, the Bible says, "And if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex them. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as yourself." Please stop this HB 87 and consider our values and principles when legislating in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster. Appreciate you coming down here this morning. Ms. Did we have somebody come in who had previously been called? Or no? Okay. Ms. Connie Norman. He said.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is my first trip down here, so I'm wholly unprepared.
Welcome.
But I will
That's
be
a perennial
in the future.
condition in this building, so don't worry about it. Be comfortable, and we appreciate your taking the time.
I'm against this bill.
Thank you.
I am soon to retire, and I hate to see this immigration problem turn my country upside down. But I would like to challenge everybody to take the illegal immigration problem, bring it down to a personal level. I feel like this is tantamount to someone coming into your house, making themselves at home, eating your food, watching your television, going out cutting your grass. Then you come home from work and they're sitting there and they're in your house and they're telling you, you have to feed me, you have to clothe me, you have to pay my medical expenses, and by the way, you can't kick me out of your house. There's nothing you can do about it. That's the way I feel that this is being forced on us. I think this bill is good, and I am a Christian and I do believe in helping people, but I think they still need to abide by the law. Thank you. And I'll be more prepared next time.
Thank you for taking the time to come down. Mr. Ronald Small. Okay. Mr. Herb Garner. I want to thank everyone for adhering to the 5-minute or getting real close to it. It's a great courtesy to other people testifying, and sure do appreciate it.
Mr.
Welcome.
Chairman, I'll attempt to make this as brief as possible.
Let me ask you to move a little bit closer to the mic. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry.
I'll attempt to make this as brief as possible.
It's your time. It's your time, Mr.
I'll give you a little
Garner.
history. My great-grandmother, Judith Hammond, was a full-blooded member of the Creek Nation. I've heard every ethnicity except Native Americans spoken of in this room. My maternal great-grandmother was Cherokee. You may ask me what is the relevance of all this. But if you want to understand the results of unchecked immigration, ask a Native American. Scripture also tells us.
Let me ask you to move a little closer to the microphone, if you could, and you can bend it down toward you.
Okay.
That one right there, the one on your right. Thank you.
Scripture also tells us not to let someone come in and usurp your house. It's also been written that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. We have a finite amount of natural resources, infrastructure, and financial resources. And no matter how much we may want to help someone and wish them well, we cannot help anyone if our nation is bankrupt. Mi casa, su casa has limitations. I cannot help anyone if I'm broke, and neither can my country. Good day.
Thank you, Mr. Garner. If we can, let's hold applause. That's really not necessary. Ms. Rebecca Alvarado. Ms. Rebecca Alvarado. All right. Ms. June McDowell. Ms. June McDowell. Did I? All right. Ms. Virginia Dufflo, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Good morning and welcome.
It's the way my husband pronounces it. It's really French. If you want to accept that.
Then I want to do it correctly, because when your last name is Golick, you hear a lot of different things. So, Duflo it is.
Until I get home.
And Ms. Duflo, you're under the 5-minute rule like everybody else.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm here to support this bill. We are a country of immigrants, but we're a country of legal immigrants. It's not that I'm against immigration. We're also a country of laws. And if we don't obey these laws, you accept the responsibility for what happens to you. If I don't like the law, I still have to obey it, but I have the ability to go and fight to change that law. Other countries have laws also, which I have to obey to enter their countries. If I went to Mexico and entered illegally, I'd be in jail. We also have a federal law against illegal entry into this country. H-2A has a visa to work here, and they can take advantage of that. Without laws, we would have chaos in this country. Allowing people to stay here is wrong. It's an insult to people who do follow these laws and the procedures that are required to come here. And being a Christian, I believe in treating people right too. But Christ also told us to obey the laws of the land. And the federal government is not enforcing the immigration laws in this country. So the states have to take it up. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Duflo. We appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much for the suggestion. I think I'll run the committee as I see fit, and it's a pretty balanced fashion. And I'll thank you. Please not to speak unless you're recognized. Thank you. If a member has a question about any kind of parity or anything like that, they're free to ask. Yeah, Mr. Sessler. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got there's a handout that's been made available to committee members. Would it be possible just to make these available to the public today as well? Would that please the chairman, or would you prefer?
Gentleman has that right. I mean, I'm not getting in the way of any information being disseminated or not being disseminated. That's the free flow is better as far as I'm concerned.
Just 10 seconds. This is an outline, Mr. Chairman, of the E-Verify system. A sample from fiscal year 2010, a sample of 1,000 people whose names were submitted for the E-Verify system, and it shows those that were approved and those that were temporary noncompliances, and that the vast percentage of those noncompliances were not even contested because, again, the person that was the proposed employer, the employee, didn't believe they had a case to frankly contest the findings. So I'll make this available to folks, Mr. Chairman, if it pleases the committee.
Sure. If there's any, pro or con, it's of no consequence to me. Information ought to be free flowing and disseminated both ways. So I've got nothing to say about that, and I wouldn't get in the way of that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me make sure it's clear. I'm going down a list just for public consumption. I'm going down a list here, and again, it's not clear from what I'm seeing. I'm just trying to cover as many people as I can within the time parameters that we have, just to make sure that's clear to members. Mr. Michael Williams.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, it's a side note. There was a young lady up here before. I was actually trying to get her name before we moved on. My office could probably give her some help with her home. I was wondering if we could bring her up. I don't know if she's left or not. I just need to get her name and information. Is that okay?
Oh, sure. Let me ask you if you want to go ahead and do that. If she can do that quietly there, or I can move to Chairman Willard's office if he's not there.
Okay, thank you so
and
much.
Even if he is there. Just kidding. I'm just kidding. Mr. Williams, thank you for joining us this morning. You're under the 5-minute rule like everybody else.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have not prepared a statement. I came here to speak my mind and hopefully leave you with a little extra time on the schedule. However, if I get to rambling, please do cut me off at my time limit. My name is Michael Williams. I am a citizen, and I have the great honor of also serving as a volunteer on the board of directors of the Georgia Tea Party. It is the position of the Georgia Tea Party to support this bill. Several months ago, we drafted a set of legislative priorities, one of which being supporting legislation that would help to enforce Georgia's borders and protect Georgia citizens from illegal immigration and its ramifications. HB 87 is precisely the type of bill we had in mind when we wrote that priority, and I want to thank Representative Ramsey for his work on it. As a citizen, I understand all too well the desire to work and the great joy that work brings into one's life. I currently work 3 jobs in addition to my full-time duties as a volunteer, and I understand better than most what joy brings into my life to work and to be able to produce and to provide for myself. However, I am also a Christian, and I believe that what makes America a Christian country, and I do believe it is a Christian country, is that we are all guaranteed equal protection under the law. And we cannot expect our government to enforce our religious convictions. I believe that we are guaranteed by our Constitution equal protection so that we can each as individuals choose whether or not to live out our religious convictions in our personal lives. I don't look to the government to enforce my beliefs as a Christian, and I don't look to my government to love me or to love other citizens. I look to it to guarantee protection of my liberties and equal protection under the law. It's been said today that HB 87 is not a loving bill, that it's un-American, or that it's unchristian. I don't believe that it's either or. I simply believe that it makes a valid attempt to enforce laws that are already on the books and to guarantee citizens of Georgia equal protection. With that being said, I also understand the desire to be educated, and I understand that many people come to America with the desire of learning and being educated and growing so that they can provide for themselves. I myself worked and paid out of my own pocket my way through 2 bachelor's degrees. With my level of education and with my youth, I could conceivably choose to live anywhere in the country, but I choose to live in the state of Georgia because I believe that this state is poised more than any other to be an example to the rest of the nation, to show other states that our government must protect us equally under the law. And with that being said, I want to thank you for your time, and I hope I've left you a few minutes on the schedule.
You have, and I appreciate. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
25.
You're 25.
Yes,
Something tells me I'm going to see you on the 3rd floor at some point in the next 10 to 15 years.
It's funny how often people say that to me. Thank you
again.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
I'm not going to get this name right, so I apologize in advance. Wendy Blute. Ms. Blute, welcome.
Welcome and thank you. This is my first time doing this, so I'm a little nervous too, and I prepared what I wanted to say today, and it's very, very brief and to the point. And you're not the only one that can't say my last name. It took me 3 months to get it right. Thank you all for taking the time to hear me today. HB 87 is important enough for me to be here today, so much so that I even had relatives get my kids off to school this morning so I could get in here and get in line to speak. I am here as a resident of Coweta County. I'm here as a mother. I'm here as a Christian. I'm here as a Tea Party member. And I am here as the wife of a legal immigrant. My husband and I went through this process together 10 years ago. It's not an easy process. It's hard. And nobody's claiming that it's easy and that it should be. Well, never mind. The United States is a nation of laws, whether we like it or not. If we have no way to enforce the laws, then what is the point of having them on the books in the first place? I see HB 87 as a way to enforce the law. If my family is expected to abide by the laws, then so should everyone in this room and everyone in this state, regardless of who you are, where you come from, or where you work. This issue is only as complicated as you allow it to be. I ask you to vote yes on HB 87 to protect my family's civil rights as legal citizens of the great state of Georgia. And I am tired of being punished for abiding by the law by way of higher unemployment rates, higher taxes, and on and on. We're doing the right thing, and I don't think it's wrong for me to expect everyone else to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blute, for taking the time to join us this morning. Mr. Samuel Molina. Mr. Samuel Molina. Give him a second in case he's in the overflow room. Ms. Martha Rees. Ms. Martha Rees. Or Rees? Rees? Okay. While they may be coming down the hall, Ms. Eloisa Gonzalez. Ms. Gonzalez, welcome.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you here this morning.
Thank you, sir.
And we're operating, as you know, under the 5-minute rule.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I will be fast.
That's all right. It's
Good
your
morning.
time. It's your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Eloisa Gonzalez. My title is a housewife. I'm a mother of 4 and grandmother of 4. I want to show you something. This is a young lady that is in a private college in her 3rd year, getting her master in mathematics. She is so smart. She wants to be she wants a doctorate in mathematics. Her sister finished college with a 4 point in psychology. Her sister's dream is to go to NASA. Her two brothers finished high school with higher honors. You see, the mother of these children is a widow. She came to this country and brought all these kids when they were little. Her husband in her country died in a car accident and was burned to death. The only way to make a future was to come to this nation and give her children a future. These children have never broken the law, but only one law. They're legal. They don't want to go back to their country. This is their country, and they want to stay because this is the only country these kids know. Last Tuesday, I was here. Someone in this panel say these words. A little bit, maybe I change it. These people are illegal. We have a law. They're breaking the law, and they need to go back to their country. I say, we Americans break the law every day, especially when we drive down 285. But there's a greater law, the law of mercy, the law of grace. Have mercy on the immigrants. Let the state of Georgia be the first state that changes the law. Put your efforts toward fighting the federal government and Homeland Security to change the law. Tell the federal government and Homeland Security to do their job. Screen the immigrants. Find them. If we find each immigrant $5,000 per immigrant to stay in the United States legally, Georgia will be #1, and the house problems that we have right now will be very low. Psalm 82:3 says, defend the poor and the fatherless, do justice to the afflicted and needy. The same mercy and grace that this great United States of America showed me back in 1968 when I came to this nation is the same mercy and grace that I'm asking you to have towards the immigrants. I remember the bathrooms and the water fountains in schools with the signs black and white. I came here February the 14th. This coming Monday will be 43 years. I'm here for my country from Cuba. Martin Luther King was assassinated April the 4th. And now remember that. You see, I love her. I love this family very much. And this is my last words to you all. I have a dream today to see all the immigrants in the United States change and become citizens of this great nation. A nation known of mercy, grace, love, and compassion. Please let her dream this dream also. God bless you and thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, for your testimony. Did Ms. Martha Rees come in? Ms. Rees? Welcome and good morning.
Good morning.
You are under the 5-minute rule, like everyone else, and look forward to your comments.
My name is Martha Rees. I'm a professor at Agnes Scott College. I just want to bring up some facts. I've done research on immigrants for 20 years in Atlanta. And in the United States and Atlanta in general, we know that undocumented people don't have higher crime rates than natives. They pay taxes often more than the rest of us. They actually have a lower rate of use of social service than natives. The children in the schools, their children in the schools are U.S. citizens. This law, I'm against this law, this proposed bill, because it would be bad for the economy of Georgia that we are all suffering. Recent information shows us that the activity of immigrants in Georgia is $21 million, and they produce a spillover effect of up to $9 billion in the gross product. In the United States in general, states that have undocumented workers have higher growth rates. This bill will be struck down at the higher levels of court, just as in Arizona. So what I ask is, who is it that's supporting the bill? who are the people behind support of this bill? It's not the agricultural industry, it's not commerce, it's not educators, it's not the construction business on which we all depend. Rather, I would submit that it's behind, the people who are behind it are the people who support the private prisons. As recent research has shown, the private prisons, thank you, are backed by Wall Street. And they also helped write the Arizona law. So I wonder, did they help draft this bill as well? I'm against this law. There has never been a law that has stopped immigration. And I just would like to ask people of Georgia to get on the right side of history, because that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Alfred Yin. Mr. Alfred Yin. All right, if he's coming down. Ms. Alexis Dalmat. Ms. Alexis Dalmat, if I'm saying that correctly. Did Samuel Molina join us? Okay. Ms. Adelina Nichols. Oh, are you Mr. Yin?
Yes.
All right, Ms. Nichols, you'll be up next. Okay. Mr. Yin, good morning.
Yes, good morning.
And Ms. Yin, I'll just remind you that you're under the 5-minute rule like everyone else.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We welcome you.
Well, thank you, the committee and panel, for taking time to listen to what the community have to say in regard to House Bill 72.
87.
I'm sorry. Apologize.
Understand.
My name is Alfred Yin, and I represent OCA plus APAC. APAC stands for Asian Pacific Council of Georgia. It has 14 different Asian Pacific community organization. Georgia is the fastest growing Asian Pacific group in the country, and it brought along economic growth to the country, to the state of Georgia. And delegation after delegation, the governor have sent to visit China and Korea and many countries to invite businesses to invest in Georgia. And that's really good. That's why we have Kia, Auto, H Mart, a lot of companies that have moved to Georgia. The House bill, this bill, is viewed as very unwelcoming to those people. Many of them operate small businesses. E-Verify have been shown to be inaccurate, but also a lot of Asian names, particularly Chinese. First name, family name first, then first name follow. So a lot of time in the spelling, pronunciation, so it comes up in error for E-Verify. So that also poses a problem. Secondly, unless you are a Native American, all of us are immigrants. Our grandparents may be, or ourselves. And the fact that this bill have exemption for agriculture, it kind of make us feel back to where it was mentioned earlier, the Chinese Exclusion Federal Law Act. Why exempt agriculture? Are they different than us? I mean, why should we be exempt? I mean, they be exempt versus the small businesses in Georgia that's bringing the economy. We'd like to urge you to really reconsider not passing this bill. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yin, for your testimony this morning. Ms. Adelina Nichols. I honestly don't remember who I said for Ms. Dalmont. Go. You know what? Let me ask Ms. Nichols to come forward because I did tell her when Mr. Yin came in, and Ms. Dalmont, you'll be next. How about that?
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Adelina Nichols. I am here as a Latina, as a community organizer, as an activist, also as an executive director of the Georgia Latino Alliance for Human Rights. I also, important for me to mention that I am an American citizen, I'm a voter, and also a Marietta resident and a taxpayer. For more than 10 years, we have been working through the state of Georgia. Our main activity has been the community organizing. The reason that we decide to go and look for these Latinos we're situated in different places around the state is because these are new immigrants that they don't know the laws or the rules of the road, or they don't know ordinance. And in the first problem that they encounter, as well as me, is our proficiency in English. In this process, all these years, we try to educate them to get to know and get adjust to the new society, as well to easier their transition as new immigrants working here, living here. All these years, we have been witnesses of how our community has grown over the years, and how we at the same time have stumbled trying to adapt to a new society. Many of us, we haven't mastered the language, and probably will never achieve that as new immigrants, but our children are bilingual, are probably that our grandchildren will be speaking English only and fully adapt to the new culture. This has been the process that can be applied to all new immigrants in this country and has occurred for over more than a century now. I am here today also because of the possible passage of the HB 87, and while some are concerned of the economic depression, putting the blame on documented immigrants. And just to let you know that a story, I recently went to Albany, Georgia, and I have this friend, his name is Juan, and we have been working together trying to pass information around the community, the Latino community. And when I asked and I explained what is going on with the HB 87, Juan told me, but what happened, you know? And I told, but people think that we are taking away jobs from other people, U.S. citizens here. And he mentioned, I had been working in this state for more than 20 years. Please tell me whose job I am taking away. And this is kind of if you go inside the Latino community, you will see that there are immigrants that we are about to reach one generation, but at the same time, you see how they have been living for more than 10, 15, 20 years. This person in particular, more than 20 years. And he is undocumented. And at the same time, we don't know what is going on in terms of, look like we are walking backwards. The same workers, Mr. Chairman, that were welcome, applaud, prize because of their presence to 1994 for the Olympics, to come and finish the work to get ready for this occasion, now are the same that are blamed for everything that is going on. I have been here in these hearings for the 3 days already, you know, waiting my turn to speak, but also to try to understand how is this rhetoric. I think that we should be working in terms of to understanding what the immigration as a social phenomenon, immigration as put it in the context. People are here working, they are not taking jobs away. Probably if we look deep, we will see the numbers that doesn't show disapprove of that. I hear that Latinos or undocumented immigrants are being the responsible or whatever the crime is going on. No, it isn't. Cobb County, with 2 pending lawsuits lawsuits right now, with it also claiming that they have capture and arrest thousands of criminals. If you see the numbers, if you see this, if you go to the sources and you see the Immigration Policy Center describe that most of these people have been detained under minor traffic violations. If you go, and I would like to invite you, Mr. Chairman, to go with me to all out the state, out of Atlanta, the area of Atlanta, you will see that cities do not have any kind of agreement with 287G or Secure Communities program, they are detaining for minor traffic violations, and they are processing people for deportation. This is something that is not authorized, but is permissive. It's this climate that is, everybody is like, you go outside and you're living like in the Wild West. We don't understand exactly what's going on when are not follow the agreements or the legal procedures that we are discussing right now. We are concerned also, if you just let me, maybe you want to ask? No, you want me to finish?
Well, you have taken 5 minutes. If you could wind up, that would be great.
Okay. Let me just do more things. Implementing laws and programs.
How about one more thing, since it's been fun. You've had your time, so if you could finish up, that would be great.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Implementing laws and programs that are based on discrimination only brings negative outcomes. The same workers that were welcomed and respected and even applauded when they came to save Atlanta's image in 1994 and enrich the economy of the state with their business are suddenly attacked with false accusations. In this decline economy, GLAR myself support a solution that respects the human and civil rights of individuals, such a comprehensive immigration reform. I respect, with a lot of respect to you, to your person, and to your best, is request to vote no on HB 87. Please don't repeat the same mistakes. We don't need to go backwards. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for your testimony this morning. And now, Ms. Dalmat.
Good morning.
Morning.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm going to try to talk just about a couple points, though. I'd like to say that I wholly oppose this bill. My name is Alexis Dalmat, also kind of an odd name. It was Dalmatowski. I'm third generation in the United States. My family came from Russia. I'm Jewish. We came because of pogroms, where we were basically forced out. Through the immigration process, our name became Dalmat from Dalmatowski, and as many people's names change and are changed for them when they come to the United States, that has a lot of other legal and immigration implications for them. So I would like to mostly talk about E-Verify today, both in the context of kind of generally how that affects people with name changes, but also how it's affected the organization that I work for. So I'm the executive director of Culture Connect, and I've sat in on a couple hearings now. This is my first time testifying, but it's just that important to me that even though I'm nervous, I'm here to talk to you about it. In the very first hearing, in the subcommittee hearing, Ms. Helen Kim Ho spoke about E-Verify, and someone, I don't remember which representative, but someone asked her, well, do you have personal experience with it? And she said no, and so I thought this would be my opportunity to tell you our challenges with E-Verify. So Culture Connect is a nonprofit that serves immigrants and refugees. Our mission is developing cultural fluency between them and service providers who are American to advance Atlanta as a flourishing, internationally diverse community. We do that through 3 programs. Language services, providing interpretation and translation to those who don't speak English, mostly in medical and school settings. We have a youth mentoring program and also an education program. In our language services program, we provide interpreters to 12 school districts around Metro Atlanta, one of them being Cobb County. Cobb County said, you know, in order to work with us, we need you to sign up for E-Verify. And I said, absolutely, I understand. So we opted into the program, started to work on that. ran new hires through, but they said, no, you need to actually put your contract interpreters through. And I said, but it's only for employees, right? And they said, no, we're requiring that this is for contractors as well. So I called up, the feds and talked to them, and they said, what is Georgia talking about? That's crazy. No, this is intended for employees only. And so this was a back and forth, spending weeks of my time on this silly thing that really slowed down our whole process and put us on hold, basically putting interpreters out of work, people losing services, and not gaining equal access to their educational rights in the school district, as well as my time, which means all of the other people that we serve, and we serve over 7,000 people a year. So I just want to say that E-Verify, while it has some issues in terms of people being flagged who actually are citizens or legal residents, name issues and whatnot, it also has this business implication that was a problem for us, and this is a federal program. And so by bringing it on the state level, it's going to create some confusion like it already has with us. I also wanted to kind of note and thank the professor from Agnes Scott who spoke earlier, because we hear a lot about the cost of immigrants and the cost of undocumented immigrants. And you know what? All of us cost something. But I'd like us to look at a more substantial cost and revenue analysis to understand, is there a profit or is there a deficit, and what are the actual numbers, because you can't look at one side. As someone who's executive director, I have to look at a balanced budget with things, as do you as state legislators. And so there are two sides of that. And the last point that I'd like to make is really just that, I appreciate this opportunity to be here, and there's so many people that feel passionate about this that we're in the overflow room, and that's where I was sitting. And you all may not have an opportunity to see who's over there, but there are a lot of stickers, and the room is filled. There are probably about 60 people over there with stickers that say no to HB 87. So I just wanted to make you aware of the people who may not get to speak today, but who are here taking time out of our days just as I am, and do not support this bill. So I hope that we don't become an embarrassment in the U.S. and internationally, and have to end up apologizing later for this bill potentially becoming law. So please vote no.
Thank you for your testimony. Let me, Mr. Cook, Charles Cook, did you want to testify? I know you've been involved in this issue, and I think I asked you earlier. This is, and for those who may have missed the last one, we sort of had Organization Day last time. This is more individual day, and I take notice of the fact that you are a board member of Galeo, which is an organization that obviously did testify last time. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct, but I was never here for Galeo, just so that
Well, I understand that, but roles and responsibilities. I have there were a number of people, just so it's clear, who had signed up last time as affiliated with a particular organization. Now are seeking to testify in their individual capacity. And while I certainly respect people to go ahead and do that in an individual capacity, the testimony won't be any different. And what I've tried to do today is to call on people, for the most part, if not totally, unless I've missed something, in their just people as opposed to organizations.
I thought you did a good job today balancing both
and
sides.
there's a huge difference. I'm going to go ahead and exercise a little prerogative of the chair, and I need to ask you a question, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple more minutes because of it. And I normally wouldn't do this, but the statement that you have previously made caught my attention, and here's what it is.
Okay.
You were quoted as saying, "We have a group of legislators who think we should build a big bubble around America and stretch Rush Limbaugh over the top." Now, I'd like to ask you, and I'll give you extra time to go ahead and answer the question. Who exactly were you talking about?
I was talking about the Congress in the United States.
The Congress.
Yeah, actually, that's a very old quote if you take a look at it.
Well, it's not that old. It's a couple months ago. I mean, I
here's my concern.
think it's important that we keep it serious.
Oh, I agree.
And
I agree.
we're not Congress. This is not a congressional press conference, sound and fury signifying nothing. This is a substantive process where generally we try to steer away from that kind of statement, and I would hope that you would go ahead and address it in a serious manner, just as we have.
Well, I appreciate that. That, of course, was not stated at a congressional hearing either. That was talking to a reporter, reflecting the concerns, of course, that I have that we're dealing with immigration issues piecemeal without addressing the real underlying problems of immigration, which is why I wanted to talk specifically about this bill today. And I appreciate the efforts that Representative Ramsey went through to write this bill. But I have to tell you that this bill has huge problems, regardless of the effect it may have on the economy, regardless of the issues that deal with the big problem of undocumented immigration in America. The title of this bill is the Illegal Immigration Reform and Enforcement Act. But it's not going to reform illegal immigration, and it's not going to effectively enforce any differently than current state or federal law, any of the laws that we're dealing with today. And one of the reasons, or three of the reasons why it's not going to do that, is because the underlying basis of the bill, as explained by Representative Ramsey in his initial day of testimony here last week, were flawed. The federal government is, in fact, enforcing immigration law. I'm on the forefront of that every day. I deal with the consequences of that enforcement every single day. This last year, the federal government deported more than 400,000 people, more than they ever have before, almost as much as they had deported the year before. In the last year, the Obama administration has effectively gone after bad employers, those employers who are breaking the law by not going through the right process to hire the right people. Never before, really since about 1993, has any administration actively enforced the law where it belongs and where the 1986 Act intended to be on employers. And they're not doing it through E-Verify. They're doing it through this process that's been existing for almost 25 years now, which is the I-9 process. Every employer in America is required to use the I-9. Every employer in Georgia is required to use the I-9. And if you're not using it, ICE has task force that now come in and come after you. And they don't just fine you anymore. They put you in jail. There is real active enforcement on the border. More than $8 billion last year was spent on federal enforcement of immigration. To say there's no federal enforcement is simply not accurate anymore. The other concern that I have with the basis of this bill is, was just addressed by a previous person, that yes, there is a cost to undocumented immigration. The number that was thrown out there is about $2.5 billion. But what is not talked about is what comes from people who live here without papers. Almost a $9.4 billion impact on the Georgia economy. Now, I'm not arguing for undocumented immigration. That hurts. It helps nobody, and it's an issue that has to be resolved. But it has to be resolved federally. A couple of the issues with this bill that I have grave concerns with, and I'll start with the very basic. The very definition of the term illegal alien, which is simply not defined in federal law, includes everybody sitting around this table. Any person who remains in the U.S. in violation of federal law. That's all it says. That believes anybody in here who's ever violated any federal law who stayed in the U.S. is an illegal alien. That's the way you've defined it. And that's going to cause a major problem on litigation in the future. You have requirements in this, permissions in this bill for people to privately sue cities and states. But what is missing from this bill is the fiscal note. Where is the required fiscal note? Where is the note that says how much this bill is going to cost? A virtually identical bill to this, another Arizona-style bill in Utah, just went through their fiscal process this week. And the state of Utah found, a state that's third the size in population and which only has 29 counties, found that it would cost that state $11 million to comply with that law from the cities and state government, city and county governments. Money that state doesn't have and money our state doesn't have. So the question is, how much is this bill really going to cost? Will it actually save money or not? And it would be really nice to know that before it passes this legislature. One of the other things in this bill that is particularly problematic is the requirement that E-Verify be used by not every employer in Georgia. It specifically exempts employers of less than 5 people. Well, here's the problem. Many employers of more than 5 people are already enrolled in E-Verify. Many of the largest employers in Georgia are enrolled in E-Verify. My firm is enrolled in E-Verify. One of the problems with making E-Verify mandatory for not everybody is that all of a sudden the people that you think might actually be hiring undocumented immigrants aren't really the ones hiring undocumented immigrants. It's the small businesses. It's the small farmers, and you're specifically exempting them from compliance with this bill. In fact, I think a number, if you looked out there, and I haven't done a study, but but I would guess it would be far more than 50% of the people working in Georgia work for companies of less than 5 people. So you're going to exempt half the employers for what reason? Now here's my other problem with E-Verify, making it mandatory under state law, and this is up at the Supreme Court right now. This is the memorandum of understanding that you sign when you enroll in E-Verify. Now when somebody says that it only took 20 minutes to sign up, then you did not read this 13-page memorandum of understanding, which basically waives your rights under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. When you sign this, you tell DHS they can come in anytime they want and take any records they want related to your employees without a warrant. I don't think a state can make employers forcefully waive their rights under the federal Constitution. And that's one of the issues that's on appeal at the Supreme Court, and a very good reason why you should delay any implementation of this bill before that Supreme Court rules on this issue. Now, there's one other final concern I have with the bill, if I may, and that involves Section 7, the issue of harboring and transporting and encouraging people to come to Georgia. This section has clear constitutional problems. Now, the federal judge in Arizona, this was in the Arizona bill, a version of this, did not rule that this was unconstitutional because she wasn't looking at basic issues of constitutionality. She was looking at preemption, and she found it wasn't preempted by federal law. So you may, as a state, we can do it. But is it, one, good public policy? Two, is it constitutional? You require that if somebody is transporting somebody, that it be in violation of any other law at the same time, but not at the same time, and you don't define what other law. So if somebody doesn't pay their taxes on time here in Georgia, they've violated a state law, and if at some other point they have somebody they're taking to church in their car, then they're going to lose their vehicle, or they're going to go to prison. I mean, this law doesn't really make sense. It's not going to stop the issue and solve the problem of undocumented immigration. The last issue is, of course, the idea that we are going to let police officers and put them in a position to ask them to, when they have time, identify somebody who's undocumented. How do you do that? I mean, really? Because they don't speak English? Because they look different? How do you put a police officer in that situation? Now, when somebody's arrested for a crime in Georgia, they go through, and they will in every county within the next 2.5 years, they will go through secure communities. It's going to be mandatory in all of Georgia counties. So if you're arrested, you're already covered. So we don't need that provision. And to put police officers in this situation is really not a good practice. It's not good public policy, because it's true that in Gwinnett County, the number of immigrants going into the jail in Gwinnett County has been reduced. But you know what also is true in Gwinnett County from my experience? Immigrants are afraid to call the police. I cannot tell you how many clients that I have had arrested because they reported a crime. Now, I know that this bill says, oh, that's not going to happen. But I've had it happen to domestic violence victims and just regular people trying to be, as best they can, as somebody who's undocumented, a good citizen of the United States. There are good, legitimate, legal reasons to vote against this bill. Forget the other rhetoric. Legally, this bill is insufficient, and it's going to be attacked in the courts, and we're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to defend it when it basically changes nothing about our situation. Thank you.
Mr. Cook, thank you for your testimony. I think it's a good time to remind folks that we are, the legislative process is a slow, grinding one in which there are many drafts. I think Mr. Ramsey spoke about drafts in the teens, 16, 17, whatever it was, and there'll be more. So I think I think we all do well to take notice of the fact that legislation takes many forms, goes through many changes, and that some of the sensationalism that we've heard candidly on all sides of any issue really are misplaced, because you're looking at it in the vacuum of one particular draft, which is not going to be the draft that passes out of this committee. And I think the author has made that abundantly clear on several occasions, and I will as well. So that sort of takes away from the real dialogue about the issue, because people start hooking on to provisions that are at least contemplated to be changed, and then we end up wasting a whole lot of time and resource. But that is part of the process, and I just thought that needed to be acknowledged. Let me ask Amy Todd with Troutman Sanders, if she's still here. Ms. Amy Todd? She is. That's him. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. While we're waiting, let me ask Mr. Doug Rohan.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Rohan. We're, as you know, operating under a 5-minute rule.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm an attorney, a registered Republican, the son of a Cuban immigrant, and the great-grandson of an Irish immigrant. I speak Spanish. I have insight that gives me opportunities to evaluate both sides of this issue. With 425,000 illegal aliens residing in the state of Georgia, there is a shadow world in which the authorities have little to no access, as the former speaker spoke of. There's no question that there's drug violence, gang activity, human trafficking, all of which need to be addressed. However, House Bill 87 will only make such enforcement more challenging. Forcefully removing and deporting, or even encouraging self-deportation through such a broad bill as House Bill 87 will be a significant misstep, I believe, in the Georgia Republican caucus. As a Republican, I believe in smaller government, fewer government regulations, and the free market to regulate behavior. I believe House Bill 87 has the opposite effect. There has been a historical need for immigrant labor in this country. Illegal immigration is a relatively new concept in our republic. Generally speaking, illegal immigrants are not flooding our hospitals seeking treatment for the flu. It should be pointed out that oftentimes they even wait beyond the point where a reasonable person should seek medical attention before they go to the hospital. That has been my experience as an attorney. When they do seek medical treatment, it's often with a huesero or a chiropractor who is catering to the Hispanic clientele as a side business, not the hospital itself. This side business brings me to the business issue that Georgia Republicans should be concerned about. The Cats of Georgia, whom we heard from this morning, estimated that approximately 60% of the population of Hispanic population of Gwinnett is illegal on their website. This translates to roughly 16% of the school population if those numbers hold true. If we were to do away with the entire illegal immigrant population, then let us also consider what it would mean if we removed 16% of the federal funding to the Gwinnett education system, 16% of the educators because their services will no longer be necessary, and of course the legal family members of those illegal immigrants that are also in the area. While this policy will cause these individuals to move out of Gwinnett and out of the state, they will move to states that are more sympathetic, such as South Carolina or North Carolina, and they will take with them those businesses that hire not only illegal but also legal immigrants that belong to their families. This includes the agricultural business, textile business, and we will lose out on their existing revenue. Now, the way to get the state of Georgia out of its economic doldrums is not only to address supporting the existing businesses, but attracting new business. It is very reasonable to conclude that businesses evaluating which states to move to when bringing new business will consider this legislation as part of their philosophy. Will they move to a state that is hostile to those Kia workers who are coming over on a visa? Will they be hostile to their family members? There are also other sources of revenue, such as the Mexico versus Bosnia soccer game on Wednesday night. I would be curious to know how much the state and city generated in revenue from such an event. House Bill 87 will impede this type of growth. In addition to the sales tax and property tax revenue that's been addressed already, we have not really addressed the tax ID issue in filing tax returns. The Georgia Budget Policy Institute estimates that about 50% of illegal immigrants comply with our federal tax rules. On a national level, as it relates to Social Security, we are well aware of the dwindling supplies of workers paying into the Social Security system. A 2008 study showed that as much as $9 billion per year are paid into the Social Security coffers by illegal immigrants. Those benefits will never be claimed by those workers. Beyond Social Security, the illegal immigrant population also bolsters federal income tax rolls. 2006 IRS Commissioner Mark Everson told Congress that many illegal aliens utilizing tax IDs have reported tax liabilities to the tune of almost $50 billion for the period of 1996 to 2003. Mismatched W-2s for the same period account for $41 billion. This is roughly $90 billion in federal tax dollars for which no refunds will be sought. A 2008 CBO, Congressional Budget Office memorandum, concluded that the E-Verify system that this state is proposing will increase the number of undocumented workers that are paid outside of that federal tax system. Excluding 11 million immigrants will further strain the Social Security system and accelerate the date for its projected insolvency. This affects the state level in the same manner as far as pension benefits are concerned. This legislation is not the corrective measure to be taken to address illegal immigration. Someone who is living here in fear of deportation is not seeking public assistance. They are not walking into a governmental office, turning in their name, address, phone number, trying to get a handout. If we address the Gwinnett Sheriff's Office 287G statistics from their well-publicized 26-day surge dating back to 2009, we will show that 379 illegal immigrants were arrested and detained on misdemeanor traffic offenses. Only 45 of those were uncharacterized or uncategorized felonies. There are some on this panel and some in the state that believe that those illegals are coming here creating false documents and false personalities. That is a felony. So even if all 45 of those uncharacterized arrests were for false documentation, we're speaking of less than 5% of the 914 illegals that were arrested during that time period. Nationally, the undocumented population of this country has doubled from 94 to 2007, yet violent crime has declined 34.2%. As the Republican base points out, we're a country of laws. Those who break our laws must be punished. However, there's not a single person in this room, and it has been alluded to, that did not speed, cross the fog line, cross the yellow line, or roll through a stop on the way to this hearing today. Did they break the law? Absolutely. Did they have concern that they were going to get stopped? No, because they weren't Hispanic. No one lives here in fear that the traffic cop, after stopping them for a traffic offense, will phone their family, let them know that they will not be here, will not come home that night, and will be shipped off to another country.
Mr. Rohan, you're beyond your 5, so if you could wind up.
Yes, sir. I'll skip to my conclusion. Thank you for the warning. No one is advocating unchecked and open borders. I love this state and I love this country. My great-grandparents fled the potato famine in Ireland. They didn't have to seek permission before they came here. They wouldn't have listened to any rules about obtaining a visa. My mother and her 3 sisters fled the Castro regime. They did so because the State Department waved a magic wand, not because they obtained legal permission to come here. What parent wouldn't break the law to provide a better life for their children? What father wouldn't risk his life to escape violence? Inaction on the part of the federal government is de facto amnesty, and we all have a right to be upset with that. But as a state, let's focus on hope, the critical budget shortfalls, and the meth that is ravaging our people. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this morning. I previously called Amy Todd with Troutman Sanders. Ms. Todd, you're under the 5-minute rule as well. Thank you.
I want to focus today on the effect this law will have on victims of domestic violence and other crimes in Georgia. I volunteer on a pro bono basis on cases for immigrants who are the victims of crime, and I work with a lot of nonprofit agencies in Georgia who provide assistance to these individuals as well. I first wanted to point out something, a comment made earlier by the individual, the gentleman from the Sheriff's Office in Gwinnett County. He mentioned that there's been a drastic decrease in calls, and I will second that. Because of the 287G agreement and stigma in that county, people are afraid to call the police when they're a victim of crime. This includes both people who may not have status in the U.S., as well as people who do have status, but it's dependent on their abuser. And their abusers use these laws to reinforce to the victims that if they call the police, the abuser is just going to tell the police it was their fault. They're going to divorce them if it's based on marriage, and then they're going to be deported and they'll lose custody of their children. This is affecting not only the victims of domestic violence, but to children who are often U.S. citizen children. I'll focus on domestic violence because that's the largest majority of cases we see. It also includes victims of rape, victims of assault, of a whole litany of violent crimes. And we've seen in Arizona, we've seen in the 287G counties in Georgia, a drastic decrease in people calling for help, whether it's calling the police or reaching out to agencies. And this bill, that the harboring provisions are very broad, And it could apply to service agencies who are trying to assist individuals who are victims of a crime and who may not have status in the U.S. or they've applied for status and they haven't received it yet. These agencies are now going to be afraid if I help someone, if I drive them to the hospital, if I drive them to a counselor's appointment, am I going to be arrested for harboring someone without status? And it's just a very dangerous bill. I wanted to point out a couple of examples that we've seen recently in Georgia. In one example, there was a victim of domestic violence, a woman who's being abused by her husband. She did not speak very much English at all. She called the police, and when they came, her husband, who did speak English, convinced the police that it was actually the wife who was the abuser. She was put in jail in Gwinnett County for 3 months. And it wasn't until an ICE officer independently investigated the situation and discovered that the wife was actually the victim of abuse. By that time, she had already been in jail 3 months, and she had lost custody of her 10-year-old son to her abuser. I will say that this is not a rare situation. It's quite common because the victims of abuse, based on just the nature of the abuse they've suffered, as well as cultural differences and the fear of being deported from the U.S., they don't reach out and they don't tell people what's happened. They don't tell the police. You know, they're being held in jail, and she had lost custody of her child. So, and again, this is damage not only to the victim of the abuse, but to her child as well, who was separated from his mother for 3 months. And thought that he might never see her again if she was deported and he was kept by his father. What is rare is that someone during the course of her detention actually discovered that she was a victim. She was one of the lucky ones. She can now get help and she can change her situation. But there are thousands more like her who are put into the system, who are jailed and deported. And not only are they damaged as a result of that, but their children are as well.
Thank you, Ms. Todd.
Thank you.
I have the last name Bervera here, and I'm not going to attempt the first name because I'll just embarrass myself. But the last name is Bervera or Bervera. Okay. I'll call on, while she may be coming down the hall, I'll call on Ms. Lisa Adler with Amnesty International. Ms. Adler, you're, as you know, under the 5-minute rule, as we all know.
Thank you very much. Good morning, almost afternoon. My name is Lisa Adler. I work with Amnesty International. We're a human rights organization worldwide with over 2.8 million members, and our southern regional office is based here in Atlanta, Georgia, in Midtown. We're here today to urge committee members to oppose HB 87. We believe this bill could have serious unintended consequences, so serious that we are urging you to oppose the bill. The bill states that officers cannot use race or color or ethnicity in determining if there is reasonable suspicion that somebody might be undocumented. Very commendable language. However, it's very hard to imagine that such characteristics will never be used. Furthermore, how would we know what in fact led to an officer to determine whether or not there was reasonable suspicion, other than that officer's word? I asked this committee to consider whether we can really be safeguarded from racial profiling, especially when we know that profiling is a common practice for traffic stops, as Representative Abrams pointed out at the last hearing a few days ago. We know that HB 87 creates new misdemeanors and felony crimes for driving, transporting, or concealing someone who is undocumented. And as we discussed at the last hearing, many families are of mixed status. So you have members of one family that are documented, undocumented, and some are citizens. So imagine my family, my father is undocumented, and I'm a U.S. citizen, and he's sick or hurt. So do I decide not to take him to the doctor because I'm fear of being charged? Imagine my wife is in labor. Do I decide not to bring her to the hospital for fear of being charged? Imagine my child is undocumented. Does the school bus no longer take him to school forcing him to walk to school or to not participate in after-school activities because there's no way to get home afterwards. Imagine I'm a farmer and the migrant laborer, the authorized migrant labor I depend on, decides to leave this state for fear that this legislation will profile them, even though they are authorized. Do I then lose my farm and lose my business? We think these unintended consequences are so serious that we urge committee members to consider them and to agree that we can't allow such consequences to happen. If HB 87 passes, all Georgians, including citizens, will essentially be forced to carry legal documents for fear of being stopped and detained. For example, as a citizen, and I am a citizen, if I walk to the store, not drive, because if I'm driving I carry my license, but if I walk to the store, so do I now have to carry proof of legal residency? Because what if I am stopped and I don't have any documents and I have no way to actually prove that I'm legal here? Can I be detained? We believe this raises serious privacy concerns, and I hope that we can all agree that this is not the kind of state that we want to live in. We know HB 87 encourages state and local police to participate in 287G and other such programs. But I think it's important to understand that, first, most Georgia counties already participate in either 287G or secure communities, which are very sort of similar programs. But there has not been a lot of data that shows their effectiveness in that both programs state that their purpose is to find the hard criminals, the violent criminals, and to deport them. Yet numerous studies have shown that, in fact, most people who are being detained and deported have been arrested, not necessarily even convicted, for nonviolent offenses. And we understand that these deportations, as numerous people have testified today, are separating families, are creating fear in the immigrant community to report anything to law enforcement, and are sometimes even resulting in the deportation of U.S. citizens and legal residents. So why would we strive to expand the use of these very costly programs during a budget crisis when, in fact, their effectiveness has yet to be demonstrated? Mr. Chairman, you stated at the last hearing that some of these unintended consequences are the result of immigrant families making these choices, right? That they perhaps should go home. And
I don't think I said that, but go ahead, finish the point.
Something about
no, you're on a roll. Go ahead.
They sort of created the conditions. Oh, I'm so sorry.
And you are at 5, so if you could wind up. Thank you.
Well, somebody said it, so I apologize, sir. But we do want to ask that you consider why people immigrate in the first place. And just imagine having to make this decision. I mean, this decision to come to a country that vilifies you, not for what you have done, but simply for your status. How terrible must be the political persecution or the economic desperation in your home country. We urge you very much to oppose this bill, and thank you for allowing us time to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Adler. Did the individual with the last name Bervera come into the room?
He did not.
Okay. I'll call on Ms. Helen Kim Ho with the Asian American Legal Advocacy Center. And before you begin, this will be our last witness this morning. I have hit, I believe, every single name on here with the exception possibly of 2 or 3 that are members of organizations that had a representative testify last time. That being said, if those individuals still do want to be heard, I will make a commitment to go ahead and speak to anybody who wants to meet with me about it. I can only speak for myself, and I cannot commit other members to do that. But I will do that. It won't be a long meeting, but it still would be a meeting nonetheless, and I offer that to anyone, to I think maybe the 2 or 3 people, again, with organizations who may not have been able to testify this morning, to do so in the next few days. But Ms. Kim Ho, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee members, for allowing me to speak this afternoon. I'll try not to go over things that others have gone through, but just as an introduction, I'm the lead attorney and executive director of the Asian American Legal Advocacy Center. We're the first nonpartisan nonprofit law center dedicated to protecting the economic and civil rights of Asian Americans in Georgia and the Southeast. You've heard in previous testimony how large our population has grown in Georgia and our region over the past 10 to 20 years. We're also a member of a loose coalition of about 35 mostly Asian American chambers of commerce, business associations, and nonprofit organizations. So in regards to E-Verify, I'm also speaking on behalf of many of those small business owners and leaders. First, we want to make clear that there is a solution, and I know that there are philosophical disagreements, but we do believe that we need federal immigration reform, and by that we mean toughen border security, reform the out-of-date process by which people can enter legally, and allow a path for citizenship for working undocumented workers currently in the U.S. with paying a fine, back taxes, and a criminal background check. Just to give you a sense, people have talked a lot in previous hearings about H-2B visas, the visas that allow for seasonal temporary workers or agricultural workers. But H-1B is a visa for highly skilled workers. And just to let you know, in the first 27 days of this year, 2011, that 65,000 cap for H-1B applications was met. So, I mean, just putting aside agricultural workers and looking at highly skilled professionals, there's not enough visas. Clearly, our current immigration laws are broken and don't meet or comport with the work needs on all levels currently in the U.S. I want to just make a few points about mandatory E-Verify policies. Many Asian American business owners and leaders, myself included, find multiple issues with it. We understand we don't want unscrupulous employers or employees to be able to work and operate here, but E-Verify is not able to accurately identify theft or fraud. That's why 54% of undocumented workers pass through E-Verify, and that was done by an independent evaluation paid for by the government by Westat in 2009. The CBO, someone mentioned the CBO report, but this is an independent, nonpartisan government agency, and they reported that mandatory E-Verify would lead to a loss of $17.3 billion federal dollars over the next 10 years because of workers deciding to go in the underground market. That's not just undocumented workers, but legal workers as well. The Government Accountability Office, another nonpartisan independent government agency, issued a report in December that made it very clear that while some improvements have been made in E-Verify, there are significant challenges that remain, and many of those challenges impact legal workers, legal citizen workers. One thing that I'd like to amplify is that E-Verify checks multiple databases. There are 2 or 3 databases under Department of Homeland Security, and then there's a Social Security Administration database. These databases aren't aligned, they're not uniform. Different agencies control these databases. Even under DHS, each database is run separately. So there's no service agreement yet between USCIS, DHS, and Social Security Administration. So even up on a federal level, there isn't clarity as to how they will work together. We are afraid that if mandatory E-Verify was passed, even in the state of Georgia, it would profoundly impact on a negative basis the services that are given out by the Social Security Administration. AARP recently issued a report in January that talked about an independent SSA Inspector General finding that SSA is inundated and suffering from serious problems because of an increase in claims, and also complain about an insufficient budget. There's been a 30% increase in disability claims, an onslaught of baby boomers that are coming, where they anticipate receiving an average of 10,000 retirement claims a day. More than half of the staffers and management of Social Security will retire in 2018. Our concern is that because the state doesn't actually control the purse strings to Social Security Administration or DHS, you might pass this law, but then who will actually process it? The people that process it is up in the federal government. They own the purse strings. And our concern for our senior population, that's going to delay the process by which people get their disability checks, their retirement checks. That's a big deal. GAL reported that between October 2009 and 2010, there were 222,000 participating employers nationally. If we just focus on the small business owners, the ones that you say over 5, less than 500, that would have to comply in Georgia alone, that number would almost double. We have 177 445 business employers that employ 500 or less people in Georgia. So think about that. Mandatory E-Verify in our state will nearly double the number of employers nationally that are currently using E-Verify. And the cost of that would be phenomenal. But again, unfortunately, it wouldn't be controlled here at a state level. And that would ultimately impact the citizens of the state. I also want to talk about the 17.8 million errors that exist. In the
1 minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That exist in the Social Security database alone. It's been shown that foreign-born legal workers are 20 times more likely to be flagged as tentative non-confirmation. And many of you guys have talked about that there's about 97% of current E-Verify employers that check their employees. They do get passed. But there's 2.3% that have been found to be TNC and then final non-confirmation. You can't assume that those 2.3 are actually undocumented. Many people change jobs or move on, and it's a very, very cumbersome process. In fact, the Government Accountability Office has found that it takes an average of 104 days for a legal employee to fix incorrect data. It's just not set up at this time for employees to actually go and fix the problems that are in these databases. In conclusion, I've said this before in the past, but this would really cause a disproportionate negative impact on Asian American small business owners. I'm sure you guys have eaten on Buford Highway. These restaurants employ other immigrant workers. They're all legal. But if there's a disproportionate flagging of legal foreign-born workers, think about how hard it will be for these small business owners that are barely making profits, that just want to stay open. It's really going to do damage to the good, hard-working legal immigrants of the state and others. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I jumped the gun a little bit Let me do this. We're already over. I've got one other person I had, and I just skipped over it. Skipped over that person in error. And this goes to a comment I was going to make generally to the witnesses who have testified today. I know we haven't had questions in an effort to make sure that everyone was heard, or nearly everyone was heard. That being said, let me encourage members that if they have a follow-up question to a witness who's testified, I have the list right here, and Ms. Bazemore has the list from last time and so forth, to follow up and to expand on points that are made, because that's important. These are snapshots, and we get that. But it's all in an effort to balance the process and to have people be heard, because this is a hearing. So I understand the frustration that members have. I get it. But let's go ahead and follow up offline if we could, and to your heart's content. Yes, ma'am. It was Ms. Betty Lee Martin, who I think is right there. Yes. I just had skipped over her in error.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I know we had spoken last meeting, and I apologize for the...
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Betty Lee Martin. I live in Clarksville, Georgia, in Habersham County, and I've been...
And Ms. Martin, you're under the 5-minute rule, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've attended the hearing and the responses made to it for 3 days. Several other speakers have addressed 2 issues that I wanted to present, so I'll just reference them before making my recommendation. The focus by the spokespersons for the Catholic, Presbyterian, and Methodist churches on the inherent dignity of every human person was primary in my mind, and I appreciate their thoroughness in presenting it. Although human beings sometimes commit illegal acts, no human persons are illegal. We all are daughters and sons of God. The Gospel of Matthew tells us in chapter 25, verse 35, that Jesus clearly taught, "I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." In verse 40, Jesus explained, "I assure you, as often as you did it for one of my least brothers, you did it for me." I sincerely hope that all Christians will take these words to heart by treating every person, including undocumented immigrants, as they would treat Jesus himself. I believe that the call from God to treat others at least as well as we want others to treat us is present in the holy books of most other faiths also. Family unity is another value that I hold dear. I believe it is a core value in most religious traditions, and several respondents on Tuesday spoke ably of the destructive impact HB 87 is likely to have on families in our state with one or more members who are undocumented immigrants. Parents will be torn from their children and spouses from one another. Children who have no relatives here who can care for them will be at the mercy of our already overloaded and understaffed foster care system. Living in terror of the possibility of sudden and violent separation is apt to be psychologically damaging to all members of a family, even if it does not actually happen to them. Just the expectation that it could is damaging. Many immigrant families have been here so long that few, if any, of their children have any memory of their country of origin. These children have acclimated to American ways and would have little or no idea how to become a functioning member of their home society. Many of the speakers before me, including some members of this committee, have acknowledged that the failure of our current immigration process is a federal problem. However, they have expressed doubt that the federal government will develop the vitally needed comprehensive immigration reform. It appears to me that many other states also have reached this conclusion because they too are contemplating laws like this. Therefore, I call upon our General Assembly to become the David that confronts the Goliath of the federal government, to demand that the current Congress enact comprehensive immigration reform within its term. Be bold in leading the way, and I believe that other states will quickly follow. Please stop trying to pick up the pieces of our broken immigration system by enacting piecemeal laws that not only may be economically and psychologically harmful to residents of our state, but which fundamentally cannot fix the problem. I ask you to scrap this bill and others of similar intent in order to put the full power of the Georgia General Assembly behind a commitment to support comprehensive immigration reform. Stand up for real immigration reform by insisting that our senators and representatives in Washington work together across party lines to fulfill their responsibilities on this critical national issue, and that they do it in a humane way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. We appreciate your taking the time to come down this morning, and again, I apologize for almost skipping you before.
Okay, thank you very much.
This is going to conclude the public hearing portion of consideration of HB 87. The next meeting that we have will be for consideration of a committee substitute on HB 87. That substitute will be published to members as soon as it's available. It'll be made public as soon as it's made available. No later than 24 hours in advance. Almost certainly more notice than that, as is our custom and practice on any piece of legislation. With that, again, I would invite members to follow up with witnesses with any specific questions they may have offline, and we'll be adjourned. Thank you.